I'd like to get everybody's attention. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Maggio, and I'm Assistant Vice President of External Affairs and Executive Director of the Northwestern State University Foundation. It's my pleasure to have everyone this afternoon gather on this beautiful Saturday in Natchitoches. I know our Chamber of Commerce is proud of these Saturdays right here because it's a Chamber of Commerce Day, we like to call it. We're here this afternoon that we're going to have a little gathering, and we certainly want to get some folks together and talk this afternoon and honor a couple very special people. And I got a few folks that want to say a few words today, and I'd like to call the first one up here right now, Mr. Robert Bice. Mr. Robert Bice is going to come up and say a few words. Mr. Bice?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chris. I am so glad to be back in Natchitoches to meet with such a great crowd of people right here. My wife and I flew in yesterday from Honolulu, Hawaii, and we want to tell you this is coming home. It's so good to be back. It looks great. It's been so long since I've seen Northwestern, and look at how it's grown, how beautiful it is, and I appreciate so much for all of you being here. I want to tell you I'm here because I was born, raised, that's how you talk about where you grew up, right here in Natchitoches. And I want to tell you, as an 18-year-old boy, I was looking at what am I going to do to get out of working summers at the lumber yard I worked at north of town here. How am I going to kind of progress and grow where I want to grow? So I looked into, what's my opportunity? What's my chance? Education was, my mind took me there as the chance to do something else. The chance of not just stacking lumber for a lifelong, which stacking lumber is a good job, I got to tell you. Built some strong football players that played right here at Northwestern, but I was ready for something else. To do that, I had to make a change. To make that change, I had to say education was my key. So I said, how am I going to be able to get to go to school, to get educated, to do something that I thought would be fun? So about that time, I was looking at career changes, and one of those career changes was taking me beyond the lumber yards, and I had a chance to do some volunteer work. But did you know that volunteer work doesn't pay very well? Oftentimes, no matter how much you volunteer, you're not going to really be able to pay the school tuition that you really want to do to kind of get ahead. But I knew that sometimes you have to take a step even when you don't know what's coming. There's a quote from a poet in Germany, Johann Goethe, and he said, until you take that first step, when you take that first step, providence seems to move, and all of a sudden people and resources you never knew were available will show up and take you to the dream that you're heading for. I took that first step, and I worked for a summer, barely making enough money just to pay for that first semester's tuition, and it was just barely enough. Now, I won't tell you how many years ago that was. Tuition's not quite the same as what it was then, but it was still more than I had. When it was time then for me to go and pay that tuition, here's what it looked like to an 18-year-old boy. I showed up at I don't know what you call the field house over here. We used to have a big room where we'd sign up, and this was back before there was such a thing as an internet. So you had to physically show up, get your classes. You had to stand in long, long lines to get your card signed, and then to pay the bill so you could attend school. I was standing in one of those long lines. Now, one of the rules about going to school, even at Northwestern was all I had to go by. You never, ever break in line. It is physically dangerous to step in front of some college students trying to get that last seat in that class. So as I was standing in line, a lady I didn't know leaned over and said, "Are you Robert Bice?" And I looked terrified up and down that line, thinking, there's no way I'm going to step up there in front of all these students, because it looks like I was trying to break in line. She said, come here, come here, come here. So I was obedient. I timidly walked to the front. She said, take this envelope over to this scholarship table. And I said, well, thank you. So I really didn't know what it was, but I didn't even open it. I did what I was told. I took the envelope and I walked over to the table. And as the lady opened the envelope, she said, well, this is great. And she looked at me and said, you don't know what this is, do you? I said, no, ma'am, I really don't. I really just want to go to school, and I just want to pay you for my semester here so that I can get started. She said, well, this is an anonymous donation for you to attend school. And I thought, that's great. I just saved myself a few dollars in tuition money here for this semester. I said, well, thank you so much. And she said, well, it's not just for this semester. So, well, what do you mean? Is it part of the semester? She said, no, it's much more than that. And I said, well, is it for this year? And her face lit up as I looked at her, an 18-year-old boy, and she said, no, this is an anonymous gift for you to attend school for the next 4 years here at Northwestern. It was amazing that just taking that one step and working for that summer at almost a volunteer situation, all of a sudden Providence or whoever moved to set me up for the next 4 years. Well, I had to reminisce back because that was some years ago. And as I got to thinking back, I said, I wonder what that amount of money and that scholarship did for me as I progressed in a career of electronics. I was in the engineering field, and I worked my way up to, I spent some years at Bell Laboratories, learned a tremendous amount, felt really good about that success, decided to go ahead and get an MBA, finished school, started on a PhD that I'm going to complete this next year. And so that little bit, at that period of time, kind of started me on a career path that has turned into something much more valuable than any one person could have imagined. And so that little bit of gift somebody gave actually multiplied itself exponentially. For those of you that are still taking some math classes, that's much better than multiplication. It made a life that then can make a difference itself. Now, I found out a couple of years later that one of the guests here today actually paid my way through school. Dr. and Melvin and Ruth Stevens were the ones that actually set me up for a career that helped me get started. And as I thought some years later, I said, I want to say thank you to Dr. Stevens. Now, I got to say in defense of Dr. Stevens, he never told anybody. I found out later, one of his daughters said, I didn't know he helped you. I said, well, I found out through some friends that he's helped several of us. And as we got to thinking, I said, you know, I had a chance it's been about 10 years ago now. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I heard about a student that was here from Africa that was having to go back home because financially he could not finish school. So I found some friends, and I said, if you guys will help me out, we're going to go ahead and keep him going, keep him right here in America, let him finish school, because this guy's going to make a difference. So we kind of formed a little team and got to helping him. And then I had my first child, it was many years ago. And we came back to Natchitoches from Atlanta. And I used to love to go to the Stevens' backyard and go fishing, because Dr. Stevens knew where all the fish were. So I said, well, if I teach my young boy how to fish, I'll get Dr. Stevens to help me out. So as we were standing there and he was showing my boy how to get the fishing pole, get the worms on, and get out on the back levee behind his house, I said, Dr. Stevens, I want to let you know something. I said, I really appreciate you helping me years and years ago. And I want to let you know that I ran across somebody that needed help, and some friends got together and we helped him stay in school so that he can complete a career that now is taking off in Africa. And so I saw tears running down his cheeks as Dr. Stevens told me that is the best way to say thank you, is to turn around and help somebody else. That told me the kind of character that Dr. Stevens had. So I want to take this opportunity to again say thank you, because you started me on a path that now it cannot be measured, because now I'm looking at being able to help somebody else. So I want to let, could I go ahead and let Randall Walker, is one of the friends I went to school with, and Randall's going to help me kind of tell you a little bit more about a friend here, Dr. Stevens. Thank you.
Well, I did get to know Robert back in school back there, and I was here under a little bit different circumstances. First of all, I can claim to know Dr. Stevens and Ruth Stevens, but I can claim to know them a little closer because to me, they're Uncle Melvin and Aunt Ruth. And I found myself at about 19 years old. My dad had a car wreck. He was paralyzed waist down. The family's on Social Security. And I dropped out of school off a scholarship, if you can imagine that. And but came to my senses after about 7 months, and Uncle Melvin said, "Well, you can probably get in down here at Northwestern. They've got a little PR group called the Entertainers, and you can probably get you a tryout for that. And then there might be some other scholarship money." So I did that and came down, and sort of like Robert was saying, I knew I was getting the Entertainer scholarship. And all of a sudden, there was another little envelope, and well, what's this? Well, okay, it's another scholarship. So between the two of them, it was able to put me through school. And, I thought that's pretty cool, doing it, for your nephew. I mean, he never said it was, but eventually he sort of figured this stuff out. And got to talking to another friend of mine a little bit later, and he's going to join us in a little bit, but he said, "Well, wow, I've been getting some help too." And Robert and I had classes. We were always competing there, and had classes, and we got to talk. Yeah, I'm getting a little help too. And you got some smart folks down here. So between the three of us, we figured out what was going on. That the Stevens were helping us out, and this was just 3 or 4 folks over only about a 3 or 4 year period that we were here. Well, to give you a little bit of background on the Stevens, Uncle Melvin, he was, started out teaching, after he'd gone back to school, he was teaching agriculture and started going to grad school and stuff, and he was here at Northwestern for over 20 years teaching agriculture while he got his degree. And he got his doctor's degree. And he liked to say, "Well, I'm a doctor of dirt." And that's what he did. He was agronomy. So he liked the sciences and everything. And from there, he said, "Well, I'm going to get my airplane license." So he got his airplane license and started using it to help consult him. Now, flying with Uncle Melvin, I actually preferred flying to driving. Because when Uncle Melvin drove, this was way before NASCAR. He had already learned to draft behind a car way before NASCAR ever came about. There would be there wouldn't be a car length. There would be a match car length between it and the next one. So I felt much safer up in the air in that airplane than I did on the ground because, at 1,000 feet, it's sort of hard to tailgate from up there. But he was a pilot. He was a consultant. Working with all those big rice farms and everything. He got interested in real estate. Got his real estate license and then his broker's license. And then he decided to go back and he became a master appraiser. And after that, when they started putting I-49 through, he found himself as a expert witness on land values and stuff. And to borrow a quote from Pat Paulson from 25 years ago, when George Bush Sr. was running, let's face it, the man just can't keep a job. So he's done a little bit of everything. Aunt Ruth, she didn't go to college there, but didn't have all the degrees, but she was just as smart IQ-wise. It's just that where his were in the sciences, soil sciences and stuff, her interests and stuff were more along human behavior, psychology, sociology, and some people would just call it nosy. But she liked knowing what everybody was doing. And I found out some more details when her grandson Jeff put a biography, and it made it even more precious to me. This started way before I knew her. One of her first jobs back in Magnolia in college, she was the postmistress, so she knew everybody's mail way back then. They came to Natchitoches, got to get that info somewhere, right? She wasn't a beautician. Didn't take her long, though. She had her own beauty shop. And then she got into real estate. So what better place to find information than the beauty shop and real estate? But she did that because she cared about people. She cared about helping others. And both of them did, and both of them kept it, kept it quiet where nobody else would know. When I was going to school here, I had gone out with a young lady on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, I see Aunt Ruth in church. She proceeds to tell me who I went out with and where we went. She knew all this stuff. I went home and I told my dad about it. He just started busting out laughing. Because 25 years earlier, after he had gotten out of high school, he lived with them for a short time in Camden, Arkansas, and he said, she did the same thing to me. She knew who you went out with and where you went. But it was that caring about people between the two of them that made them so special. As long as I can remember back, the church and Christ have been their first priority. If you've been to their house, there is always some type of Christian broadcasting on the TV. Uncle Melvin used to have millions and give away millions and millions of tapes of sermons and stuff. And I really think that's why he drove the way he did. Because, in the Bible we're told to pray without ceasing. Well, if you were in a car with Uncle Melvin, that wasn't a problem. You never stopped praying, I believe me. So he would always was helping people passing out Bibles in the Gideons. I'm sure he's still involved with the Gideons. There's no telling how many thousands or tens of thousands of Bibles. There's no telling how many hundreds of thousands of tapes he's given out to people. It gets back, to me, you can summarize the whole gospel into caring and, now I got sidetracked, into caring and sharing. You meet somebody, you care for their needs. Once you've cared for their needs, then you can share the gospel. And he's done that through a lot of different ways. With some of us, it was scholarships. With a lot of folks, it was just making his house available out at the lake. There's no telling how many thousands of Bible studies, how many thousands of students that have studied for finals out there on that point. It was always made available. Sunday afternoon, you knew you could get a meal at the Stevens. If you're a student, you get a little hungry, especially if it's tight. And all three of us were much thinner then, I assure you. And we could always count on the meal. We could always count on them. But you could also count on that any time that you were getting fed, you were going to hear a sermon from Uncle Melvin. He was going to keep sharing that gospel. And they've done that. Uncle Melvin, Aunt Ruth, there's no way, as Robert said, there's no way we can tell you how much you've meant to us and how we've tried to follow your example. And that's sort of what we're here to do today, is just sort of follow that example and try to pay it forward. So I don't know who was going to take this thing next.
Randall, thank you so much. Randall, I'd like for y'all to stay up. Robert, come on back up here. Steve Fletcher. Here's another person I'd like to call up here. Folks, these are two gentlemen you heard speak, and we're adding a third one up here. Who Dr. Melvin, I know you didn't tell him at the time, but as y'all heard the stories of anonymous gifts that paid for their education at Northwestern State University at a time when they thought that they would not be able to attend this university. Now this is just two of hundreds of stories. But these folks, a month or so ago, called us up, and it's our pleasure at this time, Dr. Melvin, Miss Ruth, at this time, these gentlemen right here have created the Ruth and Melvin Stevens Helping Hand Scholarship. where they can lend a helping hand They want to do it, they want to help students, and they want to do it in your honor. And the thing is, they have put in $10,000 as an initial gift to start this scholarship at Northwestern. It is an endowed scholarship. That means that it will go on forever and ever. They will use the interest off this scholarship, and this is just the initial gift. They have also pledged some money to get this thing going from the beginning, and they've also asked others, and we're asking others, anybody that wants to honor the Stevens in this gift. This gift will help students at Northwestern State University when they just think they don't have a chance to go to college. Would y'all join me as we move over to the Stevens in a big round of applause for the Ruth and Melvin Stevens Helping Hand Scholarship?